10 Remarkable Coincidences of History. 10. Eleanor Rigby. John Lennon and Paul McCartney first met in 1957 at a church fete in Liverpool. They would of course go on to write many memorable hits, including the song Eleanor Rigby in 1966. McCartney himself said the name came from actress Eleanor Rigby and the name of the store, Rigby and Evans, saying, "I just liked the name. I was looking for a name that sounded natural. Eleanor Rigby sounded natural." However, just yards from where Lennon and McCartney first met at that church lies a grave with a headstone. And the headstone bears the name Eleanor Rigby. 9. Violet Jessop. Violet Constance Jessop, born on the 2nd of October 1887, was an Argentine ocean liner stewardess and nurse. In 1911, Jessop began working as a stewardess for the White Star vessel RMS Olympic, a sister ship to the Titanic. On the 20th of September 1911, the Olympic collided with the British warship HMS Hawke. There were no fatalities. On the 10th of April 1912, Jessop transferred to the Titanic. 4 days later, on the 14th of April, the Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank. Violet escaped on lifeboat 16 and the next morning was rescued by the RMS Carpathia. 2 years later, when the First World War started, Jessop joined the British Red Cross as a stewardess and served on HMHS Britannic, the younger sister ship of the Titanic. On the morning of the 21st of November 1916, the ship struck a deep-sea mine, killing 30. Jessop survived this as well. In 1971, at the age of 83, Miss Unsinkable died of congestive heart failure on dry land. 8. The Grisly Fate of Richard Parker. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe wrote his only complete novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. In the book, 4 men are stranded on the remains of a ship destroyed in a storm, without any food or water. Eventually they agree to draw lots so that one of them would be killed to feed the rest. The loser is a character in the book called Richard Parker. 46 years after the book was published, on the 19th of May 1884, 4 men set sail from Southampton to Australia on the Mignonette. On the 5th of July, sailing from Madeira to Cape Town, the Mignonette was sunk by a giant wave. The crew escaped on a lifeboat, but had no water and 2 tins of turnips and the meat of a parsing turtle for food. After 12 days the food was finished, and the captain broached the topic of the custom of the sea, drawing lots to select a victim to be eaten by his crewmates. But before they could do so, the cabin boy drank so much seawater that he fell into a coma. His condition deteriorated to such an extent that the others decided he would be the sacrifice, as they didn't think he would live. The name of that cabin boy was Richard Parker. 7. When Wilkes Booth Saved Lincoln. One night in late 1864 or early 1865, passengers are buying tickets from the conductor on a platform in Jersey City. The bustling crowd knocks a young man into the gap between the platform and the train, and as the train pulls away, the man knows he will be severely injured or even killed. Suddenly there is a tug on his jacket and he is lifted to safety. He turns to shake the hand of his savior. He also shakes the hand of the man standing beside him. The man who had been saved was Robert Lincoln, the son of serving President Abraham Lincoln. The man who saved him was Edwin Booth, the older brother of John Wilkes Booth, who a few months later would assassinate Abraham Lincoln. And stranger still, the man standing next to Booth was John T. Ford, the owner of Ford's Theatre where Lincoln would be killed. 6. The Ebbin Brothers. On the island of Bermuda on the 30th of July 1974, 17-year-old Neville Ebbin was struck and killed by a taxi while riding his moped. 12 months later, on the night of the 18th of July 1975, 17-year-old Erskine Ebbin was killed by a taxi while riding a moped. Erskine was Neville's younger brother. The moped Erskine was riding was the same one Neville had been riding when he was killed. Both brothers were killed by the same taxi, driven by the same driver, William Manders, and unbelievably, carrying the same passenger. 5. The Hoover Dam Tragedies. The Hoover Dam, between the states of Nevada and Arizona, was constructed between 1931 and 1936. However, preparation work on the project started as far back as 1921. During this preparation work, on the 20th of December 1921, a crew surveying locations were caught in a flash flood. One of that crew was swept away by the Colorado River, becoming the first casualty of the project. That man was called John Tierney. On the 20th of December 1935, the project suffered its last fatal accident when a worker fell to his death from one of the two intake towers on the Arizona side of Black Canyon. That man was called Patrick Tierney. He was John Tierney's only son and died 14 years later to the very day after his father. 4. One Man and the U.S. Civil War. The first battle of the American Civil War, the First Battle of Bull Run, took place on the 21st of July 1861. It took place on the Yorkshire Plantation in Manassas, Virginia, on land owned by Wilmer McLean. McLean was a wholesale grocer who made his living as a sugar broker supplying the Confederate States Army. His house was being used as the headquarters of Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard. In 1863, after a cannonball dropped through the kitchen fireplace, McLean decided it was safer to move south. The family settled in a community called Appomattox Courthouse and lived away from the war for 2 years. But on the 8th of April 1865, the war literally came knocking when a messenger knocked on McLean's door. He had been sent to find a suitable place for the surrender of the Confederate Army. McLean reluctantly agreed to the use of his home. Lee surrendered to Grant in the parlor of McLean's house. McLean would later boast, "The war began in my front yard and ended in my front parlor." 3. Lincoln and Kennedy. There are many lists of coincidences between John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln. Many of the lists contain made-up or banal facts. But that does leave a few that are very intriguing. Both men were elected to Congress in 46 and elected president in 60. Both are remembered for civil rights issues. Both men had sons whose name had 21 letters made of 3, 7-letter names who died during their presidency. Lincoln's son was called William Wallace Lincoln while Kennedy's son was called Patrick Bouvier Kennedy. Both men were assassinated by men who had 15-letter 3-word names, Lee Harvey Oswald and John Wilkes Booth. Both assassins were shot dead before they could stand trial. Both presidents were shot in the back of the head by a Southerner on a Friday while seated next to their wives. Both men were succeeded by a Southerner named Johnson who was born in 06. Lincoln was shot sitting in Ford's Theatre. Kennedy was shot sitting in a Ford car, a Lincoln Continental. 2. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand and his wife was the trigger for the start of World War I. In fact, the sequence of events that led to the assassination was a series of strange coincidences. However, the spookiest of coincidences lies with the car he was in, or rather its number plate. The number plate of the car was A, followed by 3 I's and the numbers 118. The plate can also be read as A, 11-11-18. The 11th of November 1918 was the day World War I ended. And the A. In the English-speaking world, the day the war ended is known as Armistice Day. 1. The Wreck of the Titan. Morgan Robertson wrote The Wreck of the Titan about an unsinkable ocean liner called the Titan. In the book, around midnight sometime in April, the Titan hits an iceberg on the starboard side while traveling at 25 knots in the North Atlantic, 400 miles from Newfoundland. The 882 feet long ship with a triple screw propeller sinks, and more than half of her 2,500 passengers drown because the ship is not carrying enough lifeboats for all on board. As you may have spotted, there is remarkable similarities between the fictional Titan and the real Titanic. The Titanic was just shorter in length at 800 feet, and it also had a triple screw propeller. The Titanic also sank around midnight in April in the North Atlantic, 400 miles from Newfoundland, after it hit an iceberg on the starboard side, traveling at 22.5 knots. When it sank, more than half of her 2,200 passengers drowned because it was not carrying enough lifeboats for all on board. What is almost unbelievable is that Morgan Robertson wrote his book in 1898, 14 years before the Titanic sank in 1912.